Good day, everyone who's signed in to this presentation, and welcome to the Weighting in MarkBook webinar. My name is Dennis Mercy, and I am the Director of Web Technologies for the Academe Group, the authors of MarkBook. I'm one of the originators of MarkBook and have used it extensively in my classroom prior to my retirement from teaching, and have been directly involved in the design and development of our newest HTML5 version. The purpose of this webinar is to demonstrate how weighting of assessments is implemented in MarkBook to help you to understand the impact of weighting on the overall grades and how to ensure that each assessment makes the desired contribution. We'll also compare some of the calculation methods available to you in MarkBook, how they work, and why they may produce different outcomes. So let's get started. Why do we use weightings? Weighting is how you specify the importance of each assessment, which will influence what proportion it will make up in the overall grade. This allows you to apply your informed professional judgment. So here's a list of assessments. Some are small, others are quite significant. Note that the entry scores have different out-of values, which may imply a weight and might affect the student's final grade. If weightings are not applied, each assessment contributes equally to the overall mark, which is probably not what you intend, as the unit test is a more significant indicator of student learning than, say, a quiz. The average is calculated by adding up the percentages and dividing by 9, the number of assessments. Now let's apply some weights. One way of doing this is to use the out-of mark as the weight, since the number of marks in an assessment is one indicator of its scope. The contribution of each assessment to the overall mark reflects the weight value assigned. The unit test contributes 10 times what quiz 2 contributes in our example, which is appropriate as it has 10 times the marks available. The overall mark has been adjusted because of this change in emphasis. With no weighting, the unit test contributed 11.1% to the total, so its influence has now more than tripled. The low mark in quiz 2 also contributed 11.1% to the equal weight, so its influence has now dropped to only 3.6%. You can use any scale you wish, and here are assessments that have been assigned a weight on a scale of 1 to 10. Use whatever scale makes sense to you. Just be consistent. The weights we have been using so far are termed entry importance in MarkBook and are entered when you create a new assessment entry as shown. The entry importance value can be changed at any time by opening the entry screen, selecting Edit Entry, and entering the new value. MarkBook is very flexible and allows you to change any information that you have entered at any time. So don't worry about making a bad choice for a weight. You can easily fix it. So here's a simpler example that we will use to investigate how entry weighting is calculated. You'll never have to do the calculations yourself, as MarkBook takes care of that, but it is useful to understand how overall marks are determined. Weights in this example range from 1 to 4, with 4 indicating the greatest importance. The weight value has an effect of applying to each mark 1 to 4 times, depending on its weight. So the first mark, 96, is used 3 times in the calculation. The last mark of 8 is used only once. So the first mark has 3 times the influence on the overall mark. The average is determined by adding up all of the marks in the in effect column and then dividing by the total weight of 17. The median is calculated by putting the marks in order from lowest to highest, and then picking out the mark that's in the middle. The mode, on the other hand, is the mark that occurs most frequently, and so is a measure of the student's most consistent performance. If you use levels, the calculation is the same. Each mark contributes as many times as the weight value. As well as weighting of entries, MarkBook supports weighting by category. These are the Ontario assessment categories, which may be assigned a weight. And in particular, these are for science. They may be different in other contexts. These weights will determine how the average marks for each category are combined to determine the overall grade. Categories can be established when you create a class and then define those categories. Click on the Edit button to open a panel to enter the revised value. Here's how the weights interact. Entry weights affect how the marks for each entry are combined to generate a category mark. Then category weights determine how the category marks will be combined in order to determine the overall or final grade. It's important to review the results of weighting to ensure that each assessment is contributing appropriately to the overall mark. This slide illustrates some common problems that might crop up. Entry number 1 contributes 0, as you can see. This may be deliberate if you wish to exclude that assessment from the calculations, or it may be because the weight has been set to 0. Changing the weight for the assessment to an appropriate value will correct that error. The highlighted column displays the percentage that each assessment contributes to the overall mark. Entry number 7 shows a very high contribution of 16.7%, much higher than any of the others. Now, this may be caused by one of two factors. One is that the weight may have accidentally been set too high. This can be corrected by changing the weight value. The second cause could be that it is the only assessment in that category. This illustrates the problem, and it will correct itself as more assessments are added to Category 2, or you could temporarily reset the weight of Category 2 to a low value. So here we get 69%. Now be especially alert for this problem early in this semester, as there will be relatively few examples and entries. Misconceptions about weighting abound. One is that out of is the same as weight. Not necessarily. Or each assessment's importance is its percentage of the overall mark. That depends. Entry importance should have a small range like 1 to 3. You can make it as large as you wish. Each category counts even if it has no assessments or entries. Not necessarily again. Other misconceptions are the category weights must sum to 100. MarkBook will take care of that. Or weights and the weighting method cannot be changed. We've already seen examples of that. Or the more assessments in a category, the more that category counts. No, you've already set the boundary. And lastly, all assessments or entries with the same importance count equally. Again, we've seen how that works. So MarkBook gives you many options to easily manage weighting, to verify that you are able to ensure that students' marks accurately reflect their achievement. But MarkBook is a guide only, and your professional judgment is the final arbiter, and this informed professional judgment is guided by MarkBook.